Ambassador, you've been in your current post for a little over 5 years now, and then you also spent 5 years in a different capacity at Russia's mission. So no doubt you've been a part of and seen and dealt with so many different international crises, including the pandemic and conflicts around the world, including the one between Russia and Ukraine, and then what we're seeing now in the Middle East. What would you say concerns you the most today?
I would say that the most important crisis for us that we have to deal with is Ukrainian crisis, because it directly affects Russian interests. And we are trying our best to create conditions for Ukrainian crisis to be resolved. Most of the things happen in the battlefield, but still the president has said numerous times that we would prefer to reach our goals by political and diplomatic means. And he outlined clearly the conditions that have to be met in order to be resolved, the crisis to be resolved. But here in the UN, we also have to withstand a lot of malicious acts and, unfriendly initiatives aimed against us by Western countries. Sometimes we simply fight back slander about our country. So this is a top priority, I would say. But of course, the international situation is very volatile, very explosive, and conflicts occur everywhere, even where you do not expect. And these days, the crisis in the Middle East is the most acute. It's on the top of the agenda of the Security Council and the UN. And the recent aggression by Israel and US against Iran is something that we have to deal with. And the conflict spreads to the Gulf countries, to Lebanon. Lebanon is on fire. And we shouldn't forget about Palestine as well. It's escaped from the limelight recently, but it's still there. It's not resolved.
Let's talk about what's happening in the Middle East, the ever-evolving situation that you referenced. The UN Security Council recently failed to pass a draft resolution urging all parties to stop military activities. Is the Security Council experiencing a lack of effectiveness in keeping the world safe?
Well, you've mentioned very sad moment because it was another example when the Security Council became hostage of very politicized approaches by some member states, first and foremost Western colleagues in the Council. Russia put forward a genuine initiative, very clear, very straightforward, aiming at de-escalation. And it was very realistic and pragmatic. We didn't name and shame, we didn't call countries by name, but we called on de-escalation, condemning and preventing any attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. We called on countries to return to negotiating table. This resolution didn't pass. Some member states abstained. Most of the European countries and Bahrain itself, the country from the Gulf. But their explanations, I think, didn't convince others. US and Latvia voted against. So it was revealing to see how the Security Council is prevented from fulfilling its duty. And we are deeply grateful to the countries that were with us promoting this resolution and supporting it. And it was China, Pakistan, and Somalia. So they stood with us and voted in favor, knowing that this initiative is needed and genuine.
A couple of the resolutions I'd like to ask you about. Security Council resolutions 2231 and 1737 on Iranian nuclear issues. Where do they stand? Do you think that those resolutions have lost force?
Yes, we do, and it's not a political issue for us. It's more of a legal matter. because the resolution 1737, as well as the previous resolutions on Iran, they were terminated in 2015 when the agreement was concluded, JCPOA, and then agreement was endorsed by 2231, a resolution of the Security Council. Subsequently, the resolution 2231 also expired 18th of October last year, as it was meant by the agreement and the resolution. Some countries, European countries, we call it European Troika, did not agree with that and said that they want to invoke snapback. But they basically didn't have the right to do so, because they also had their obligations according to JCPOA, and they didn't do what was prescribed to them. So they broke the rules before, and they also disagreed to invoke the dispute resolution mechanism that was the part of the agreement. So in our view, they had no right to invoke snapback, and 2231 ceased to exist. This legally grounded position is supported by China as well in the Council, and we are very open and vocal on presenting our arguments in the Council, and we will do so in the future. No plans to change the position here.
There is another resolution, 2817, that condemns Iran for defending itself against the U.S. Israeli attacks. Why did Russia abstain instead of vetoing that resolution?
This resolution was presented by Bahrain and supported by Gulf cooperation countries that are good friends of us, and now they are suffering from the escalation in the Middle East. And so they came with a draft that in our view was one-sided and biased, because it put whole blame onto Iran, and it strikes on Gulf countries, actually American military facilities there. And we told them that we see this draft this way from the day one. Russia and China presented amendments to make the text balanced, but unfortunately the pen holders, as we call them in the Security Council, the authors of the text, didn't take them on board, so we had to abstain.
You mentioned this a moment ago, but China and Russia have stood together on the same side for many votes over the years, many years. Can you explain your alliance and your perspective for our international audience? And what unites the two of you, the two countries, when it comes to votes on the Council, regardless of what it seems to be?
Well, I think that relationship between Russia and China is at its peak in history. So, and also since I first came here in the UN to work in 2011, I've never experienced any problems on coordinating our position with Chinese colleagues. We always stood side by side, and that came naturally because we have the same views on sovereign equality of states, of justice, of protecting the principles of the Charter, and a lot of things to name. Yeah, but it's these are good words. But when it comes to particular conflict, you somehow know that your Chinese colleagues have the same assessment of the situation. And I would say that we got used to it. So we don't lose much time on this coordination because it, as I already said, it comes naturally that we really assess the international situation very similarly. And I think that it also important to mention that we withstand the same challenges. So the same attacks, same patterns against us, and this strengthens our bond. It's seen well not only for us, Chinese and Russian diplomats, but for the outside as well, outside world. And I know that many countries in the UN who need help, who need support, they always know that they can come to Russia and China, and their situation will be reviewed in a balanced manner, and they can seek our support, and this support will be provided.
Ambassador, we know that right now is an important time at the UN because there's the process underway to choose the next Secretary General, which the next leader obviously inherits everything that is happening right now, between the budget crises to the conflicts around the world, and also the growing humanitarian issues that don't seem to be getting any better. What kind of a leader does the UN need right now?
I think it's the most discussed issue in the UN corridors these days, what kind of a leader we need for the organization. Because the organization is not in its perfect shape, and everyone knows it, and so everyone wants a leader that can take UN into the better future. And of course, we need an energetic person who has deep affection into the institution. That's clear. But this should be a person who also understands what was wrong in the past and what mistakes were made, so that we find ourselves in this situation. So deep, thorough review is needed, and lessons learned should be drawn from what happened. What we would value most is that UN and its leadership goes back to the basics in terms of impartiality and neutrality of the organization. What I mean is the charter. We have articles 100 and 101, which says that the SG and the staff members shouldn't take any orders from external forces or certain countries. So this should be prevented, and this understanding should belong to this new person. We unfortunately faced a different approach from the current leadership in the UN, especially in the Ukrainian crisis, when Secretary General took sides, and by this he lost the opportunity to be at the table of negotiations or any kind of processes related to this crisis. And this is not only about Ukraine, but any other important situation that we deal with. So this has to be restored. And then the Secretary General, in my view, should understand well that we are intergovernmental organization, and it's his or her task to create these favorable conditions so that member states negotiate and find solutions and decide in a good faith, in a spirit of a dialogue. This is a very limited list of claims on what the SG, what approaches the new SG should have, but definitely it depends on personality as well. And I hope that we will be able not only to find this person, but also agree on this person in the Security Council.
Ambassador Anna Evstigneeva, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.